Hey everyone, Gott Warner here, and I want to welcome you to another edition of Power Purls Podcast. So today we're going to be jumping into a special series that I'm going to be bringing you for the month of January. It's going to be a little workshop called a Stitchucation series. So we'll be focusing on the swatch and the stitch patterns and the story that they tell so that you can customize and make something your very own. So that's what we're going to be doing through the month of January. So I'm really excited. And if you watched my video from last week, it was kind of like a little segue to what we're talking about today. So today is an introduction. I'm going to go a little bit deeper than I did last week, but last week was more about here is the swatch, just have fun swatching and all the different things that you can do with your swatch. This goes beyond the gauge swatch. How can you add embellishment? How can you add fully fashioned areas so that you can really get a feel for what's happening in that swatch? So basically the idea is to customize, make this your own. And so as I was about to say, or maybe I started saying, so for those of you that are designers or you want to start designing, this is great because the stitches, the swatch, they tell that story. Everything that you need to know about that design. It's your blueprint. But then let's say you don't want to design, you want to make something for yourself. You want to make something that you love. Same thing. I mean, you can customize, you can learn how to make this fit your style and your taste. So you might find a design that you like and you just want to plug in some new stitch patterns. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. So it is also helpful if you want to make any kind of yarn substitutions. And I know that that's big, especially if you see a design in a magazine or a book, a pattern, and you want to use a different yarn. Sometimes it can be hard to substitute, and the best way to know if that yarn is right is swatching, because you know how it's going to drape and how it's going to behave. So before we jump in, I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Gott Warner, and I am the host of Power Purls Podcast, and I'm here every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing you Power Purls Unplugged, and it's a mixed bag of things. Sometimes I'm talking about what's going on the podcast, and other times I'm talking about more specific things, like we are today. And so that's a little bit about me. And now I'd love it for you guys to chime in and just tell me, where are you viewing from? I would really love to hear. And while you're getting ready to just jump in and tell me where you are, I'm going to geek out a little bit because I actually have two phones now. This is like crazy pants. So I got a new iPhone. And I know that if any of you watching, you guys know that I've made that change. And so I'm no longer an Android girl, although I kept my Android so that I can watch the videos and monitor the comments. So I'm really excited. So of course I'm looking at this right now and it's saying that it's paused. So I don't know if that's so true. But I am trying. It's always like these little technical difficulties. So I'm hoping that we're going to get it right one of these times. So here we go. It looks like, because I want to know where you guys are watching from. So let me just. All right. So I see Jana. Hey, Jana. Nice to see you. So let's see if I can get into the comments here. Yes. Hello. Yes, finally. Okay, so Montevallo, Alabama, is that right, Jana? So who else is out there watching? I just wanted to kind of get a feel for that before we jump in. And I know it does take time for many of you to come in and join the room, so to speak. So I also have my computer next to me because in case the technical difficulties occur, which they seem to be, but not maybe on the video side. If you guys can see that, it's saying it's paused, but the comments are coming in. So now I see Melanie. Hey, Melanie, nice to see you. So Melanie says, Germany is getting ready for Christmas. This is awesome. So, all right, we'll just kind of get going if you guys are ready for this, because you know what? I'm ready to share some of this exciting stuff that's going to be happening during the month of January. And so I'm going to put my phone down right now. And so the reason why I am monitoring what's happening in the comments separately because I have my back-facing camera. So many of you have said, it took me a while to figure it out, that that everything is kind of the mirror image. So that fixes it by using my rear-facing camera. Okay, so let's get into this. So why the swatch? What is the importance of focusing on the swatch and the stitch pattern? And so we went through this last week. Now, when I started designing, I started reading a book, which you guys know I've talked about many times. It's called Designing Knitwear by Deborah Newton. And she spends a great deal of time talking about the swatch. Not necessarily the gauge swatch, but why it's important to sit with your yarn and relish the experience, to really enjoy it and see where those stitches go. Even if you're just knitting straight stockinette, I mean, if you're doing that with, a yarn and then you change it up with something completely different, the experience can be quite different, even with the simplest of stitch patterns. So that's really important. So, I'm just going to talk about five things here. So, and again, this is part of what I spoke about last week, and you can catch that video in the archives. Or if you are a Patreon member, you can get the show notes and also the pattern for a cowl that I was showing off in the video. You can get that as well for members. And so anyway, so it's value, right? I'm sorry. So I was trying to cue myself that I have to give you the value now. So here are the five points, right? So it tells that important story. So it's that swatch I was talking about in the introduction here. So it's telling the story. What is the story that these stitches are telling you? What makes them important for the design that you're going to create or the project that you would like to make. Also, by doing this, it helps you to get familiar with the stitch pattern and the multiple, and also making your swatch a lot bigger and working that multiple several times will help you, especially if you're going to be working a garment that's going to have many areas, working that multiple many times over. And the third thing is this yarn right? Is it right for the project that you want to make, or the thing that you want to design? So you just want to make sure that, it's going to help you achieve what you want to achieve. And then also, really important is our stitches per inch and our rows per inch. So I touched on this last week. I'm going to dive deeper into this during our little workshop series. But that's really important because for those of you who want to modify or customize or plug and play a little bit, it's really important to know what those stitches are, the stitches per inch are, and the rows per inch are, because then you'll know how to actually plug in a new yarn based on the new gauge, if that makes sense. And I know that can trip a lot of us up, especially, it's something that a lot of people talk about. You read in Creative Knitting, you see in other books, volumes have been written about gauge. And the importance of it, but somehow it still eludes us. And I know it has a lot to do with impatience. That's what we talked about last week. Mostly it was more about, learn to love the swatch and why you should. And this is why, because later on you'll have tears, especially if you're making a garment. So you really want to know what the gauge is, and your rows per inch. Very helpful. And 5, but I already kind of said it helps you to design or to customize. So just reiterating that, because whether you're over here on the side of wanting to design or over here wanting to just simply customize, do a little plug and play fun, and do your own thing. So I'm talking to both sides of the spectrum because as yarn crafters, we got into this, even if we're a designer, we got into this because of our passion for yarn, for knitting, for crochet. Some of you might be out there that are crocheters too. So everything I talk about absolutely applies to crochet as well. So what's the next step? So, kind of going in this introduction. So I'm going to talk about a lot of different things. I've got lots of things around me on my craft desk and on things in front of me that you can't see. So how do we customize? So what we want to do is we just start with the basic shape, a basic shape that you like. And I'm using the example of a triangular shawl because I have this design template that I created years ago that I use over and over and over and over and over and over. I add embellishments, I add edging, I add fringe. You can see one of the designs that's here right in front of me. So this is a design that I created for Annie's Signature Designs for the Spring 16 collection. And what I did was I used 2 different colorways and I doubled up on the yarn a little bit too. And so here it's just the most basic. So it's garter bands, big garter bands with smaller little, sections of stockinette. Now, what did I do on this? What I did was I used 3 strands. Let me see if I did. Yes, 3 strands held together of the bluish, those thicker bands that you see in garter stitch. I hope you guys can see that. And then for those pink sections, I used a different color, like something that was a little more contrasty. And I just used 1 strand because this is a fingering weight yarn. 1 strand, and I worked stockinette, okay? And then this is a design that I created, similar to a design that I created for Creative Knitting Magazine a couple years ago, minus the fringe. And I just changed it up ever so slightly by just, adding some fringe here, which is super simple to do, of course. So let me put her back on here, or this back on her, I should say. And so I'll show you a few little pieces that I've done that are just basically just like this, but minus the fringe. So again, this is my little introduction showing you what you can do with the basics. The same stitch pattern at this point, same stitch pattern, same shape, same idea, different yarn. And so what I did here was I used in the blue section is just a worsted weight yarn, and then those whiter sections it's a fingering weight. And then on the bottom, and this was just a fluke. It was the same yarn, this white yarn that I'm showing, that's in these smaller bands. When I got to the end, right before the bind off, because this is a color changing yarn, it started to turn this lavender purpley color. So anyway, there's that. I didn't even weave the ends in because I just love making these shawls over and over. And then this was something that I showed you. If you are a viewer of The Editor Wants to Know, this little series that I do on Wednesdays over on the Creative Knitting Facebook page, I showed you this little shawl. It's a baby. So now that we know what our shape is, let's say we know we want to make a triangular shawl, but it could be anything. It could be a cowl, like the one I'm wearing. I'm going to talk a little bit about this as well. So then we start making babies. This is our baby. So this is just what I'm showing you here, but can you see what is different about this? It's actually quite different because I've got garter bands, and then a stockinette, and then this open work design, and then another section of garter. In between that is stockinette flanked by another garter band. And that is taking this same exact shape, pretty much the same number of stitches in the repeat. It's all geometry. So if you guys remember geometry for shawls, this is the same idea, because the center area with the yarn overs here, that's always the same in every one of these patterns. It doesn't change. What changes is in between the yarn overs and the edges. And that's how I designed this pattern. And I varied it up, changed it up, and plugged in this open work pattern. And so here is another variation. This was also in Creative Knitting a couple years ago, just a very dainty fingering weight version. So what I did was I used the garter sections, and then I did like a I think it's some kind of an open work, a dimple stitch, I think is what it was called. It's from Barbara Walker's Treasury of Knitting Patterns. But these little open work sections, and then in the bottom, look what I did. I used a feather and fan. That's all I did. So I basically worked out the math so I could figure out how to make that happen with the feather and fan. And that's what it is, you guys. So when we know what our swatch is saying, and we've made this little baby, because in this particular scenario with the shawls, this is my gauge swatch. It's not this, right? This is not what I'm using for these designs. So I showed this to you last week. The very, tried and true, good old-fashioned gauge swatch, which comes into play, of course, for your most basic patterns, because the stockinette gauge is here, and I keep track of everything on a little piece of paper. So that's something that we'll be talking about more and more in this workshop. But for the purposes of this introduction, and so here's my baby. I customized it. I made a little portion of the shawl because I wanted to plug in the stitch pattern. And this helps you when you do this, when you swatch, it helps you to play with stitch pattern multiples, because if you look at most magazines or books, you'll see that, they all have stitch pattern, stitch pattern multiples. So, so for example, let's see. So I'll just show you this design here, which I'm wearing a variation of. The other piece, I'll put it up on I'll put it on Our Lady. How's that? But before I move on, just a little bit, I'll take a little breather by seeing what you guys are up to, because I can't tell from these comments. I may have to switch it around and see what's going on, so I can keep track of what you guys are saying. So let's see. So let's see. So Melanie asks, is the gray blue in the shawl also fingering weight but held 3 strands? Is the gray? Yeah. So Melanie, I think you're talking about. Are you talking about this one? The gray and blue, the gray in the gray blue shawl, the gray blue shawl. I'm thinking this is what you're talking about. But anyway, so if that is what you're talking about, no, this is 1 strand held together. So that's that. And then, yes, so Melanie says, Stitch Workshop, I'm so excited. No, the first shawl. Oh, because I don't know, color-wise, it might look different on your side. Is it this one, Melanie? Is it this one? Could it be this one? Let's see. This one? This one? This one? Actually, and I don't know, is it this one, perhaps? Because that was the first one, and then I had the one on the mannequin with the fringe. Is that it? Hey, Lulu, nice to see you. No, with the orange stripe. With the orange stripe. Oh! This one. So this is the one. This is the one, Melanie, right? So this was, the blue section, blue sections are 3 strands. 3 strands held together, and then with the pink is one strand. And I'm thinking that that's what you were talking about, Melanie, because I don't have anything with orange here, unless that's what you were talking about. All right, so you guys ready to move on a little bit, and then I'll come back. I hope I answered that right for you, Melanie. I apologize if that was a little confusing for you. So, all right. So I am going to show you the next thing. Okay, so this design here, which I hope you can see, I'm going to pull her in a little bit. So this is a design that is in Creative Knitting, the spring issue right now. So I was starting off by showing this to you here. So here it is, just on the model. And, I'm wearing it. I'm wearing another version of it right here. And there's, this is a slightly different. So this is just an all over, they're both all over stitch, all over open work pattern. But you can kind of see that here. And you can see it a little bit, maybe a little bit more in detail because it's down like a capelet here, which I can also do. Let's see, I'll kind of pull that down for you. So there we can see what that looks like. You can kind of get a feel for that stitch pattern, perhaps. And then the one that I'm wearing is very similar, but I'm using like a dimple stitch. I don't know if you can see. I'm using a little bit of a dimple stitch with like some purl ridges in there. So anyway, this is just an example of how you can plug and play and change things up. And so this is it's a cowl, and it's called a cowlet. So it's a cowl and it's a capelet. So you can wear it either way. And it's made in the round. And I basically, of course, I did my gauge swatch so I can figure out exactly how to plot this stitch pattern on the design. And then I said, hey, I want to try it a different way too. So I did it like this. And so this isn't just sort of it's a continuation of exactly what I did with these shawls. And I just realized that I have this like crazy, I'm like kind of going back here because I'm showing you something. This is like I was playing with some super bulky yarn. And I did so remember I showed you this baby before? I'm just going back to the shawl. So I showed you this baby. Well, I just decided to do a big version of it. A really super big version here. And so, I mean, I'm just kind of all over the place because I wanted to show you all the different modifications and things that you can do with just that blueprint of the swatch. So the next step is, of course, once you're ready and you want to start playing, you've been sitting with your swatch, you've been hanging out with it, you've been making those babies, you've been, you blocked it, so you want to make sure that before you get that gauge, so you know how to modify, you know what your stitches are, your stitches and your row gauge are, because it's just important for you to make those modifications or start that design. And then, let's get this into a stitch notebook. And I have mine next to me. And so I'm going to just show you what I did, just a little drawing, quick little show and tell, if you will, of something that I did when I was designing this shawl that I showed you before, the one with the open work, this one here, right? I'm sorry, with the feather and fan, right? And so I have my stitch pattern that was on the end and the multiple, so I know what the multiple for that is. And I just started sketching. This is a really simple, kind of a beginning point. And I just want to dispel a quick little myth that some of you, especially if you're starting to design for the first time, you can use a stitch pattern from a dictionary and modify that. So if you want to turn that into or add that to a design, then it does become part of your new design. So that's why stitch dictionaries are out there, and most designers rely heavily on stitch dictionaries to create their designs. And you can always, if you feel more comfortable, you can always acknowledge the original, the book that you got the design from, the stitch pattern from. So that's totally your call, and it's always a nice thing to do anyway. So I definitely encourage you to do that. So this was just an example of how I'm going to start working on this design and plotting things out. And so sometimes I just kind of go so free form, and I keep coming up with ideas, like here's more sketches, and they're just kind of crazy all over the place until I finally arrive, at my final example. Like for a while I had this idea here to do kind of like all these little mini triangles, and that's a matter of having a book that gives you the ability to also have graph paper in the book. So I really like to do that. Have your stitch and your row gauge noted somewhere in the corner. Those are really important things to remember. So I think that's pretty much it. So let's see if you guys have any questions about what I've been talking about, and do you guys think, does it sound like it would be a lot of fun for you to take part in this little Stitchucation workshop during the month of January? Because I think it would be a lot of fun to see you there. So, all right. But I think that's about it. I mean, I just wanted to quick jump on here. It's, we're busy. Holidays are upon us, and so in between the baking of the cookies and making the peppermint bark, which I was doing yesterday with my son, I'm just trying to plan this workshop for you guys that I really think you've been asking about. And so starting in January, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And so as I said earlier, this is open to patrons. So if you're a member of the podcast, over on patreon.com/Power Purls Podcast, you'll get this video as show notes. And also I'm going to be providing a fact sheet of what I talked about today as like an introduction to the workshop. So you'll have that going forward. And by the way, if any newcomers are watching, there's a special going on. I'll just let you know now. It's $1 a month. If you want to sponsor the show, for just $1. You've got 10 more days to jump on this opportunity. So you get lots of goodies. You get the show notes from these videos. You get my secret sauce to designing killer designs. There's a bunch of different things that you'll have access to. So you can check all that out by going to patreon.com/Power Purls Podcast. So like I said, 10 days left. This all goes away on January 1st. And last but not least, you guys, today is the new episode. Just went live at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so I can catch all those time zones. Beth Casey with Lorna's Laces shares a very enlightening conversation with me on the podcast. And so you can catch that now by going to powerpurlspodcast.com. And, you guys, this has been great. Please take a moment right now to share this out with your friends if you think that they will benefit from learning about, how to take the stitch pattern, how to customize, how to make it your own, because I think this is useful for so many of us. So, with that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.